overall point, which comes right after your topic sentence. So that's what you're about to argue. And then your evidence, which in a literary argument, your evidence would be quotes from the book. Here it can be quotes from experts. If you're basing your argument off of an article, it can be quotes from the article. Anything like that that's, somebody who has ethos. If you don't know what that is, you can ask your teacher really quickly. But anybody who's, is an authority on the subject, you want to do quotes or just a point by them and make sure you cite your evidence. You do not want to plagiarize. Cite that evidence. So in an MLA style paper, which I assume is what you're going to be writing here in Florida, right after the evidence, you're going to put in parentheses the page number or the author. Talk to your teacher about how they want you to cite it because some teachers have different preferences, but just make sure you get that citation in there. Plagiarism is very, very bad. Okay, after your evidence, you're going to have your analysis there, the A and Peel. So your analysis, that's your own words, and that's how it connects to your argument. So you've just given somebody else's words, so now what's your stance on that? How do you feel about that? And please don't use I or me in a formal essay. You do not say I or me in a formal essay. I would like to emphasize that. But your analysis is kind of, I guess, almost a debrief of the evidence. So you gave the evidence. Now, why do you use that evidence? What does that evidence mean? That's what you're explaining in your analysis. And usually you want 1 to 2 sentences of analysis after your evidence. Okay, and then after that is the link, which can be included in the analysis. The link connects that point back to the overall point of your argument. So you've just argued that school uniforms and dress codes can limit self-expression. You've argued that. Now you have to kind of remind the audience, this is why I was arguing that point. I'm arguing that point so that because I think that dress codes should not be allowed in school. So that's just, you're going to connect that statement you just made, all of that evidence, connect it back to the main point. And the link doesn't have to be that long because hopefully if you've been doing a good job with your analysis, you've already explained that and you don't want to be redundant. That little star right there under cite evidence, transitional words and phrases. Okay, so these are going to give your essay a nice flow. If you aren't sure or you're having a hard time thinking of some of these, if you look them up, just look up like transitional words and phrases, you can find many, many charts online of just lists of these transitional words and phrases. These are things like similarly, on the other hand, on the contrary. They're ways to transition between points, either to similar points or points on opposite sides of the argument. But by using these between sentences, it keeps your essay from sounding too pieced together, and it kind of gives it a better flow because you're connecting your points. One thing that might come up on those charts, however, is like first, second, and third. At this level of writing, you do not want to number your points like that. Please don't use those transitions. They're very helpful for your thinking, but they don't show a superior understanding of the content. So avoid those numbered transitions, first, second, third, last. Please don't use those. There are lots of other better phrases you can find on those lists. Alrighty. Next, we're going to transition right here. All right, so I told you I'd come back to this earlier. In an argumentative essay, you have to include a concession and a refutation. So when you're writing an argumentative essay, you're arguing one side of the argument. You can't be on the fence with these. You have to pick or choose one side or the other. It doesn't have to be what you believe. You just have to be able to support it very well. Okay, so your concession is when you say to the other side, obviously not like this, but you kind of tell them, okay, this is a valid point, and then you have to refute it with why you chose your point. What makes your point stronger than this other argument? So with every argument, there are going to be good points and bad points on both sides. If you don't include a concession, your argument can be very quickly undermined because if they say, oh, but you never addressed the fact that blank, they've already undermined your whole essay. So by including a concession, you acknowledge that you do have an understanding of the other side. You've looked at the evidence on both sides, and with all the evidence in your hand, you used that and chose your side. So why is your side stronger than that? But make sure you include a concession and refutation in an argument. Once again, don't say you, I, or me in a formal essay. This is just kind of my way of writing it in more conversational manner, so it's easier to understand. So with a concession, it was once said to me that you set up the bowling pins, you set up that other side of the argument, and then you, with your refutation, you knock that argument down and you say, but it's a weak argument because these points are stronger. All right? Now for some more tips, we're gonna transition over here. Please don't use contractions in a formal work. You will sound much smarter and you will sound like you know the material much better if you don't use contractions in a formal work. This means no kinda, no because, no can't, don't. Just write it out. Cannot, do not. So you can use apostrophes for possessives, and please do because that is grammatically correct, but please do not use contractions. If you're typing the essay, a quick way to do this is you can hit Command F for Command Find, and you can search an apostrophe, and then just double check that the only apostrophes you have are for possessives. Please don't be using contractions because it just makes it seem a little bit less formal, a little more like you're texting a friend than writing an essay for school. Okay. And next we're going to move on to our diction. So for those of you who don't know, diction is just your word choice. So throughout the essay, you want to vary your diction. Don't be using the same word over and over again because it gets a bit repetitive and the reader gets a little sick of hearing that same word over and over again. If you're struggling to find synonyms for that word, you can use a thesaurus or a dictionary. Use your resources. They're there for a reason. All right. Another thing to be sure you use are strong verbs. Instead of saying, she really likes blank, say she loves blank, or she's passionate about blank. So once again, you can refer to a thesaurus or dictionary to find these verbs, but try to use stronger verbs because it makes you sound like you're at a higher level of vocabulary and just a higher level of writing in general. All right, that third bullet point there, try not to include like, use, kinda. Those are all very informal words, and they all have much stronger synonyms. So instead of saying like, and very is another one I did not include on that list because if you say very and then a verb, most likely you're going to be able to find a stronger verb to replace both of those. That also will help you later when teachers start putting word counts on your work because you can get rid of unnecessary verbiage. All right, and then once again down there, all copied wording must be cited. So if you use a quote and then you repeat that same wording of the quote, those aren't your words. Those are somebody else's words who you quoted there. So make sure you give them credit for that because you wouldn't be too happy if someone else started using your work and not giving you credit because those were your thoughts and ideas, and why should they get credit for them? All right, so if you repeat the wording of a quote, make sure that you put it in quotation marks or put it in your own language and develop your own argument about it. You do have to have evidence in something, but the evidence always has to be cited because otherwise it is plagiarism, and that is bad, bad, bad. Alrighty, so thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully I'll be back in a little bit, maybe next week, with some more tips and tricks for your next activity. I really hope this helped. If you have any questions or if this didn't explain anything in detail, please let your teacher know. I know most of you have Mrs. King. She is my mother, so if you let her know about something that was confusing to you, I'll be sure to cover it in the next video. Hopefully this was helpful. Have an awesome weekend, guys, and good luck on those essays. Bye!